Hello.
Hello, good evening. Is this DJ Dominik?
It is. How you doing?
I am doing awesome, buddy. Nice to talk to you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. I've been looking forward to this interview. I've been actually watching your podcasts. I went back and watched your interview with James and with my good friend Rob Scartad. And the last one I watched was on my break at work. I was watching the one you did with Biggs. I like it, and your dogs look awesome. I love your dogs.
Oh, you know what? I just have the one. But yes,
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Do you have a cat as well?
exactly. I have a cat and a dog.
Oh, okay.
But
Okay.
yeah, they tend to make cameos in all my videos, don't they?
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
And yeah, thank you for checking those out. The ones you named are actually ones that I haven't heard much feedback from because they're not getting as many clicks.
Oh, okay.
But that's
Well, they should because they're awesome. I mean, because we talked. What day is it today? Tuesday. So we just started talking. Was it Sunday? And you sent me the one you did with Brad, and I watched that one. That was awesome, and it was. I watched the whole thing in its entirety, and I was sitting here with Heather, and it got when you were talking about me and Ecstatic, and Brad said, "No, I think he just worked at Ecstatic," and I'm like, you know, I had that Rick James moment, you know, that one where he's like, yeah, it's like he's acting like I'm gonna go, you know, put my feet all up on his couch. Yeah, I remember putting my feet all up on his couch. It was like, I didn't work at Ecstatic. Oh wait, yeah, I did.
I had to ask you yourself because the way I was talking to you, it sounded like you didn't. I'm like, you did work there, right? And you're like, yes, I did.
I did.
I did.
Yeah, yeah, I did. Yeah.
Well, and here's the thing: is that I guess okay. Let me do a little bit of a backstory here to my listeners. Dominik is somebody I grew up listening to. He's somebody I've met through the scene, not on a formal basis, but as a performer. I either was emceeing for him or emceeing at a party that he was at, and we met as entertainers that I'm sure he's met hundreds of guys like myself, and I faded into the mix. With that, he's a guy that I didn't reach out to at first because I didn't think it would be attainable, to be honest. And I've reached out to a lot of people. I've reached out to, I'm not going to say because they haven't gotten back to me, and if they do, I don't want to make it sound like they took this long. So I've reached out to a lot of people, and I didn't even think of getting a hold of you because I didn't know where you were. I didn't know Dominik was still around, like that I could. And to be honest, it was one of your girlfriend's friends that actually reached out to me. I believe her name's Stacy.
Yeah.
And she said that, you know, you should interview Dominik. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'd love to interview Dominik. Where is he? And she's like, well, I'm friends with his girlfriend. I could put. I'm like that. And to be honest, I've seen your profile come up, but I didn't realize your real name is Dominik.
It is, and you know what? That's really funny because, like, as you know, as I've been like not really researching, but like just getting to know what your interviews are like, and just, you know, playing the last 25 years of, you know, everything that was rave in my head, kind of like having one of those life flashing before your eyes, you know, like really, really quickly. I just remember, like there were a lot of people who would come up to me at parties and stuff and you know, introduce themselves, and I say, well, I'm Dominik. They're like, okay, well, what's your real name? I'm like, that is my real name. Like, can't make that shit up. Like, I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, and a lot of them were taken aback because, you know, so many DJs, you know, they perform under pseudonyms. You know, they come up with like really awesome names like Groove Rider, and like, I just like, I'm gonna stick with my real name.
Well, and it's a staple name. You know, Dominik is. I don't know how to describe you other than here. If you've watched my videos, then you've heard how many people have mentioned you as having an influence in their progress in the electronic rave community, right?
Which is awesome, and I don't know if I deserve those kind of accolades, but I mean, it's very appreciated. And yeah, I don't know. I've also been around for like a really long time, and you know, I had the fortune of, you know, back in the early days of the scene, like I would say like if you know, like guys like Mark Oliver, Alex of London, like, you know, like Psychosis and all those guys, you know, Peter and Tyrone and Shams back when there was like the three of them doing like, you know, underground house parties and stuff. If that was the infancy, I entered the scene while I was a toddler. So it wasn't like, it was sort of starting to establish itself as a self-sustaining scene and a self-sustaining community, but it was still in those kind of baby steps, you know, where we were still doing break-in parties and you know, keeping things like super hush-hush and super secretive. You know, you go to Union Station and, you know, you hang out at the Harveys, meet up with your friends, and then get on the shuttle bus and go wherever the party is. So, I mean, like a lot of the stuff that happened, you know, before me, even though it wasn't too long before me, you know, 4 years is a really long time, you know, especially like, you know, like in the rave scene, you know, so many things change like within the span of 4 years, that it kind of, when I entered the scene, it kind of just started to snowball, you know, and people started to, you know, take notice. And, you know, in the tapes, like, you know, you asked me, you know, was Ecstatic the first place where I bought my first mixtape? It wasn't the first place I heard the music, but it was the very first mixtape I ever bought was a Groove Rider live mixtape, and blew my mind. Like, I just fell in love, like fell in love with breakbeats at that point.
Well, yeah, and you know what? We're getting ahead of ourselves because we're diving into the beginning of Dominik. Yeah. I don't want to go there yet.
Yeah. Sorry.
But no, I appreciate everything you're saying, and I guess I'll do a sidebar. Would you throw Dr. Trance into the beginning?
Oh my God, yes. And you know what? And a person who does not get as much credit as they deserve, Chris Shepherd did so much for the scene. Chris Shepherd was the reason why I got into a lot of the music that I got into, like, you know, back in the mid 80s, you know, I listened to CFNY religiously, and every Saturday night from 7 till 1 a.m., Shep did his radio show, and he would play, you know, Nitzareb and Skinny Puppy. Like, this is the first place I ever heard Smothered Hope by Skinny Puppy and fell in love. And, you know, it was the first place where I heard Who Is Elvis and heard The Hoover for the first time, and blew my mind. Like, you know, and those guys, they brought To Unlimited, you know, people, like, a lot of the scene was underground, but what they did with bringing it to the radio, like Don's show, like Energy 108 would not have been as successful as it was had it not been for Don.
And Chris, if I'm not mistaken, Chris was involved too.
I think Shep, I'm not sure.
To be honest, this is really funny that we're talking about this, because I was actually with a customer today that has nothing to do with the rave industry, but he's actually a raver. He's probably, you know, I'm not going to throw his name out there or anything, but he happens to be a customer of mine. So whenever we meet, we always end up talking old days. And he brought up the death of Dr. Trance and the beginning and all this, and he actually brought up Chris Shepherd, and I said, wasn't the last I heard of Shepherd was with the Love Inc. stuff, and then things kind of took a turn for the worse for him, and that was the last.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about the Love Inc. stuff.
You remember that, right?
So yeah, with his little Bjork, like
the little two ball
buns on the top of his head.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but if you after that, he went downhill with Substance, and that's the last I had heard of Chris. And he the guy, he said, well, you know where he is today? He actually got a PhD, and I'm like, what? He's
yeah,
like,
I mean, the last time I saw Shep, I was working at HMV on Queen Street, and I would see him every once in a while. At that point, he had already, like, he moved up north, but he was, like, you know, taking care of himself. Like, I mean, listen, we all did some sort of substance, you know, like some more to the extreme than others. But I mean, he like, you know, Shep wasn't the greatest DJ. He'd be the first one to admit he wasn't the greatest DJ, but oh my God, what a personality. Like I used to go see Shep, you know, every Friday night at RPM, you know, when he was doing like Acid House, and like RPM would just be rammed with people, just like, you know, my mom is calling me. If you hear, if my voice cuts out, it's just because she's calling me. But
it's all good.
I'll get back to her.
I bet you will.
But I mean, like,
you're talking about Chris Shepard, Ram Jam at RPM.
Oh, and it was just amazing. Like he had like the personality. It was like, it's Shep. You know what I mean? And like, where, you know, Don had, like, Shep had the voice, but Don had the voice. Like, Don's career in radio is unparalleled. Like, what he and, like, David Marsden did, you know, with CFNY, and then with Energy 108, and then with Groove, you know, onegroove.com, and with Don, like, with, you know, I had a show on Chin FM with Grimace, every Monday night from like 1 a.m. until 5 a.m. And every night there was a different electronic show or rave show. And we would not have had that possibility to, you know, reach out, you know, because we'd have people who, like, ravers, who, you know, it's Monday night and it's 1 o'clock and we're getting calls and we're getting requests, and you know what I mean? It's like, it's just a different type of interactive medium that would not have been possible had it not been for Don.
Well,
I mean,
sorry to cut you off. The interesting thing is I'm sure many years after that was doing a radio show on 88.1 because of you. Monday nights, 12 a.m. till 5 a.m. before I got onto 89.5. Nice. But it's
and I mean that, like, CKLN did a lot as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, you know, Muffin, and I love Medicine Muffin, aka Snoop as I call him, is like him, Marcus, PhD. Oh my God, like unparalleled talent, and like the nicest people like you'd ever meet. And that was the scene. And I mean, not to skip ahead or anything, but I think being a hardcore DJ allowed me to interact with everyone, because, you know, I was the only hardcore DJ at a party. So I'd be playing trance parties and the jungle parties and the techno parties and the house parties. You know what I mean? So I got to know every aspect of, like, the music, because I was, you know, because there were DJs that, you know, just played jungle parties, and there were just jungle parties, which was, you know, awesome. And you know, as the scene grew bigger, you'd have a jungle room and a house room, and, you know, I'd always end up 9 times out of 10 I'd be playing in the drum and bass room, which was, there's no other place to be. I'm sorry, at a party there is no more energy than there is in a fucking jungle room. You know, and it's just that, I don't know. I tend to ramble a lot, so if I do, just cut me off, keep me on topic. It's just like, I just think about, like, you know, the last 25 years and, like, you know, what has happened in my life in the last 25 years with regards to the rave scene. And it's just like, it's like one of those, it's like winning an Oscar where you have, like, you know, there's so many people that you'd want to thank.
Yeah, but then the music will start playing and stop you. And that's what you're asking me to do. Just play the music and stop me from talking so that I don't ramble for 15 minutes. Right? Because that's what happens when you win the Oscar, is you end up on the stage and then you're like, right. I'd like to thank...
yeah, exactly.
And they play that music.
Going
it's like,
on and on, because, like, I mean, ever since we started communicating and we arranged to do this, I've just like been thinking about like, I've kind of just like become very reminiscent. No, I've
That's a good word. You can say reminiscent.
I've started to reminisce about like all the different, promoters and different DJs and and all the people that I've met over the last 25 years. I've met a lot less over the last let's say 9 or 10 years, but oh my God, did I meet my fill of people within that from 1993 up until that point. And as someone who's shy by nature, I won't even ask a stranger the time. Thank God for my phone. I was happy doing what I was doing because people would come to me and, introduce themselves to me, which I thought was awesome because I wouldn't, the most that would happen me going through a party would be smile, say hi to people, and that was pretty much it. But after a set, I'd meet so many people and it just made me happier than a pig in shit because in any other social setting, I would not be the type of person that would go up to someone and, introduce myself to them. But at a rave where, you had all these, like-minded people, everyone's there and there for the music and there for the atmosphere and there for each other, it just seemed like second nature to just go up to a complete stranger and just sit with them and just start talking politics or talking about anything, and that's the one thing that made the community what it was.
Yeah, it was for me too. I mentioned that to one of my former interviews about what attracted me to the rave at first wasn't necessarily the music; it was the people, the sense of community. And the whole atmosphere around it. Obviously, I was indulging in drugs a lot as a kid too, and that was a part of it as well. But the reason why I'm in it today is A, a love for the sound, but B, a love for everyone in it. Like you say, we're more like when last year we lost a few people, and when I show up at these funerals and then the celebrations of life, and I get to see everybody. It sucks that it's under those circumstances, but I'm glad that I can say hello to over 100 people who I know by first name, and that really does mean a lot. But hey, with that, let's get some fun questions that aren't music related. Then we'll jump back into the rave stuff. Okay?
Okay, sweet.
I think based on the photos I've seen of you that you're a baseball fan. Am I safe in saying that you're a ball fan?
I'm a soccer fan. I like baseball caps.
That's it. You like the caps.
So when I was working at HMV at the Superstore at Yonge and Dundas, there was a guy there, my buddy Brandon, who loves sports. He did podcasts about sports stuff. We listened to Tim and Sid all day, whatever, at work, and he's like, "Oh, Blue Jays season's tickets are coming up. Do you want to get a 10-game pass? They're $50. We'll sit. They'll be up in the bleachers or whatever." I'm like, "Oh, that sounds like fun. We can just walk to the game, smoke a joint beforehand, go in and watch it." Dude, so fucking boring. I can't, for me, the ultimate, the ultimate baseball game for me is you show up in the third, you leave around the sixth. Because I can watch it on TV because of the commentating and stuff, and I guess, if I ever were to go to a game, I'd probably get one of those little radios where I could hear,
like all the senior citizens do.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. So it's kind of like, it's like closed captioning for the hearing impaired kind of thing. And just have someone just talk about what's going on in the game. Because I don't drink, and so I'll go and it's, I can understand people, enjoying it, and people, people who love baseball can also look at soccer and just be like, "Dude, it's so fucking boring." You know what I mean? So but I do love the jerseys and I do love the hats. So that's two good points, I guess.
Well, then thank God we have a team with a nice jersey and a nice hat. Then, thank God.
Oh, I know, right?
Yeah, it's and you know what I'd say about appreciation of sports, I think, comes from an understanding of it. If you don't understand, like for instance, football's a great example. Baseball is one too, but it's very cognitive, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. But for football, it's like if all you see is the ball get hiked and then a bunch of men smash into each other, you don't understand what's going on the field on a cerebral level, let's say. Then it's boring.
Right.
Like hockey doesn't take much understanding. It's entertaining no matter what. It's very easy.
It's very fast paced, like basketball, right? They're like high. You know, I mean, hockey is like awesome. It's also a contact sport.
I was gonna say you can
like
run out of bounds in basketball. There's no running out of bounds in hockey.
No, there isn't, because the board stops you from running out of bounds. But yeah, like I mean, I played sports like, you know, all through pretty much my childhood and my teenage years. I like football, and I do understand the complexity in it. I just find it's very, I don't know, like if I prefer to watch a rugby match or an Australian rules football.
Well, then you understand those games.
But I guess that's a soccer player in me.
Well,
Like,
it's
I don't
also
really
hold on.
understand-
Let me stop you there. You're talking about two
Okay.
sports that are not popular in Canada. So you obviously understand those sports. Like, do you understand cricket?
I do to a certain extent, but I mean, I don't really understand the rules in Australian rules football either. It's just entertaining to watch because these guys are just massive. The field is massive. They're running for days, and they're like smashing into each other. It's highly entertaining.
Australian football is the funnest thing. And those guys, like you say, I met a couple of them. They're like volleyball players by height. They're like 6'10", 7 feet tall, but then they're built like football players. And they're, like you say, they're huge. And you watch them play. They play like a form of rugby football that's full contact with no, except for the things that cover their ears. They wear those ear covers.
Yeah.
But it really is. And I honestly can't watch it because other than looking at the guys and going, holy shit, they're big. I don't understand. And cricket, that sport, that Australian football. Another one is soccer, which to me, I understand that for soccer fans, I think there's also a sense of pride that comes like the Olympics, for instance. When you're watching the FIFA World Cup, you're not just cheering for soccer, you're cheering for your country. And I understand that. And typically little villages in those other places will play village against village. You don't have, you know, Toronto Blue Jays filled with a bunch of Toronto players going to play the New York Mets filled with New York players. You know what I mean? They're just signed ball players. So who is the Toronto Blue Jays really, right?
Right.
And that I guess I get lost and I can appreciate other people and why they like their sports. But you seem to like sports that can keep your attention. It sounds like you've got.
Well, no. I mean, baseball, like the very first team sport that I ever played, I was 11 years old, and I played baseball, and I was shit. You want to know why I was shit?
Go ahead.
Or
Why?
how I knew I was shit? I played right field.
Oh yeah, you're shit.
Yeah, dude, garbage. Like I would close. Okay, you remember the theme song? This is gonna be so random, but do you remember the theme song for Who's the Boss?
Whatever happened
with
to
Tony Danza? He was a baseball player.
Of course, I
And
remember
he's
it's him and the Cardinals sliding into
He slides into home.
Yeah.
Dude, I did that once, but the Diamonds, you know, in Little League, like, and I'm talking like house league Little League, not like Little League.
Like it was concrete, like concrete gravel.
Like it's all that gravel shit.
Yeah.
Dude, I slid into home just like that. First of all, I didn't even make it to home. And second of all, I had all these little fucking rocks that I had to pick out of my hand. And I was like, yeah, this sport is not for me. It's very difficult. Like, one of the hardest things to do is to actually hit a baseball. Like, your reaction time, like, and if you notice, like, I don't know if you still follow sports or like watch TSN, watch highlights. Baseball is the only sport where if there's a highlight, it's a defensive play. It's very rarely an offensive play unless the guy drills it, like, you know, over the stadium and into the parking lot. And I've always found that very interesting. All the plays that make the highlight reel are all defensive plays, which is very rare, because in every other sport, most, there's either like a 60-40 split on offensive plays or 90-10 split as far as offense versus defensive plays. So I've always found that fascinating, but like, I just can't sit in a stadium and watch a game.
Well, here's one thing I'll throw at you. When it comes to the appreciation of baseball, it isn't about the action when the ball's put into play necessarily. There's a lot of mind games being played between the batter and the pitcher. And the pitcher typically will have, a starting pitcher typically will have 4 or 5 pitches. And they're all going to be at different speeds and in different locations. So what a batter, like, I'll give you an example. Greg Maddux, who's a famous pitcher, he's in the Hall of Fame. He told a story about how in like the 1989 World Series he had Darryl Strawberry. I'm throwing names out there. I know I'm getting them wrong, but the story itself is right. Okay.
Yeah.
So the guy comes up to the plate in the 3rd inning. He's got a 2-1 count. Greg Maddux is pitching to him. He's got a 2-1 count. So Greg intentionally threw him a cutter inside, and Darryl hit it as a single into left field. The next batter up, Greg struck out, and they were out of the inning. In the 8th inning, Greg had to face Darryl again, and sure enough, he got him into a 2-1 count, and knew that he had thrown him that cutter intentionally last time, and he had done that to set him up for this situation now in the 8th. And what he did is he threw him a hooking curveball that Darryl swung at and chopped down to first, and they got out of the inning. So basically, this pitcher planted a seed in this batter's head that he was going to throw a certain way, so that later in the game when it mattered more, the batter would bite on it. It's almost like a game of chess. So
it is. Well, here's a question for you then. Since you like baseball.
I love baseball.
Okay. Because I had this discussion. We'll call it a discussion. It wasn't really an argument. We had this discussion because we were talking about sports and stuff, and I had this discussion with a couple of coworkers, and I said to them, because curling was on the Olympics, and one of the girls that I work with played curling. She was I guess a curler, a curlist. I don't know. She was on a curling team, and I asked her, what is the most important position on the curling team? Like, who's the one that ultimately calls the shots? Who's the person that controls? And so we got to talking, and I think it was a skiff. I'm not sure. But I asked her, I said, okay, well, baseball. I'm like, who's the most important player on the baseball field? So in your opinion, who's the most important?
The back catcher.
Thank you. That's what I said. I said the back catcher is the one that controls everything, because he's the one that can see everything. Everyone else is facing in. He's facing out. He sees everything. He's the one who calls the shots.
He's also the one taking the signals from the bench. So the bench will relay signals to the catcher then relays signals to the field relays them outward. But you're right. Aside from that little thing that I just said, he's also the one who has this perspective that is different than the way everyone else is viewing the game.
Like, he's the one who can see that, the guy on first who's known to steal is taking a little bit too much of a lead, and will, he will get him, to either throw to first or, so she thought it was the pitcher, which I totally disagreed with, because I totally think it's the back catcher.
Well, here's the thing. The back catcher is also dictating everything the pitcher's doing. When you listen to the best of the pitchers speak, they'll tell you that they don't go up and call a game. The catcher does. They just throw what the back catcher tells them to throw. And
exactly. It's like the most important position on a soccer team is the goalie. The goalie is the one that, controls the game. And I don't even know why we're talking. See, the rambling thing. It happens all the time, and you'll get caught up in it. That's just like I do. But
we're talking about what sports you like and why you like them. It's okay. You're not rambling.
Yeah. No, I mean, I like baseball. I appreciate baseball. It's, it's a hard game to play. Back in the 70s when I was watching baseball, the big running joke was, look at the fucking beer bellies. And now, like, the amount of training that they do, it's insane. Like, and apart from, the odd steroid scandal here and there,
Oh, come on.
these guys are built, and they're built for speed, and and even, just the mathematics of baseball, like why it's 90 feet, between the bases. I don't know. Do you ever watch the ESPN 30 for 30s?
No, I do, but not the one that I'm sure you're referring to right now.
Oh, no, I'm not really referring to any of them. I'm just wanting to know.
Oh, okay. Yes, I've seen some of them, but to touch on what you did say there about the 90 feet to the base, do you know Ken Burns? He does a lot of great documentaries.
Yeah. He did the ninth inning, and he also did the 10th inning. Yeah.
Okay, well, he did a huge documentary on baseball, which is actually it's 16 hours long because it's 8 episodes, 2 hours each. But he starts you at the beginning of a game called Circles or Rounders, and he brings you all the way to today, and he brings you through the invention of the baseline and stuff. You're looking at like the 1910s, 1920s. Balls and strikes is also around that time. It was in the late 1920s, I believe, that you had the invention of the back wall, which is where people like Babe Ruth are born because the home run then became existent. Before that, you had fans would actually stand out in the field. I don't want to go too far into baseball in this, but I could tell you some great stories of.
No, go ahead. This is very interesting, actually.
Okay, I'll tell you one interesting story if I can stay on pace with this. So if you go back to about the 1890s, there was a baseball game before the World Series. It was just a championship game, and during the championship game, out in the field, you wouldn't have a wall. You would have people. So if the ball went into the people, the players would actually literally push the people away to get to the ball, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So what happened was they were in the bottom of the ninth. The team, home team, is down by a run, and they've got a runner at second base with 2 out. So the guy hits a ball into right field, and sure enough, it goes into the crowd. Well, what he does is, as he runs out the ball, he rounds first base, and the guy that was at second base, he rounds third and starts to head home. Well, the guy who had turned at first base, instead of continuing to second base, he realizes that ball's into the people and decides that he's just going to go home and start celebrating with the other guy because they're about to cross home plate. So he does. He goes over and he celebrates. Meanwhile, out in right field, that guy goes into the crowd, finds the ball, throws it into the infield. The second baseman steps on second base. The umpire calls him out, but nobody notices because there's such a commotion that they think they won the World Series, if you will. It's not until the next day that the newspapers print who won the actual game that the other team realizes that they lost. The guy that made that mistake, the guy who rounded first thinking he had made the game-winning hit and decided to go in to celebrate, got so many death threats that he ended up committing suicide.
Oh my God! Well, I mean, if you just look at what happened to Joey Bartman, I don't know if you watched that.
Oh yeah, Bartman.
30 for 30.
I haven't, but we all remember Bartman.
Dude, it's actually quite sad.
Well, they brought him back, when the Cubs won the World Series. Bartman was there.
Yeah, they did. Well, but I mean, even the funny thing is, and if you haven't watched the 30 for 30 about Joey Bartman, I strongly suggest you watch it because I never watched the game live when it happened, but they were winning correct me if I'm wrong, 8-3 when that fly ball went out into down the left field line, and Joey Bartman, was it Joey Bartman?
I don't remember his first name. To be honest, Joey sounds wrong, but I remember Bartman.
Yeah, it does sound wrong. Joey Bartman sounds like,
I think it's Steve or something. Steve Bartman or something, I think.
Steve Bartman, that's it. Thank you. And they blew an 8-3, just a complete collapse, and the whole, first of all, it's the curse of the GOAT that they were cursed to never play in a World Series game because back in, almost 100 years ago, some guy wanted to bring his GOAT to Wrigley Field, and they wouldn't allow him in, so he cursed the Chicago Cubs to never be present in a World Series game because they wouldn't let him in with a fucking goat.
We all know, the infamous curse of the Billy Goat, and then there was also Boston's curse of the Bambino.
The curse of the Bambino, yeah.
But that's baseball, right? Baseball's all about those stupid, silly. And I don't think it was that big of a deficit. I think they were up like 5-3 or something, but that allowed us to extend the inning.
They blew, like, they were up by at least 5 runs.
I know they were winning.
They were winning, and then they just lost.
Well, but that was the beginning, dude. All that aside, and here's the thing: I know why you're saying watch it because I have read about what happened to that guy, and I don't think that that's good at all. If I was one of the people around him when that happened, I would have been telling people to fuck off and leave him alone. But at the same time, like, dude, come on, like, get your head in the game. Like, if I'm in the stands and a ball starts coming towards me, the first thing I'm going to do is look in front of me to see if a player is coming towards me too. You know, you look up and then you look.
That is the biggest lie. If you see, a foul ball coming towards you,
I do not.
You are going to react like every single person around.
No, man. See, you're a baseball 3rd inning to 6th inning viewer, and you're the guy who thinks everybody does that. No. If you're in the first row, if you're in the first row at a baseball game, you have a responsibility that if it's on the ground and it's in foul territory, I get that. You know what I mean? Everyone goes diving over the thing to go get it. But if it goes up in the air, the first thing you do before you start reaching up is you look in front of you to see if the player's coming over. If the player's coming over, you move back, and you'll see it, dude. Watch the games. You'll see fans.
I would do it too because I've been hit by a baseball. Like I wrecked the camera lens on my Note 3 because I was at my buddy's softball game and I was sitting behind the fence, and sure enough the ball gets hit, like tipped foul, and it starts coming up towards me, and I'm like, yeah, it's coming right for me. Oh wait, I'm gonna try and catch it, and caught it with my phone. Like I would not be like. For me, the reason why I like sitting in the level 500s behind home plate is that there's no risk of any ball coming towards me. Like, I've gone to Blue Jays games where we sat like down the third baseline. Terrifying. Don't like it.
You get a lot of foul balls down there, yeah. But okay, let's sway away from the baseball. That's enough baseball, I think, for today. Let us talk about, what do I got here? Pop group. You know what? I asked Brad this question. I'll ask you it too. Who's your favorite pop group? If you had to pick one.
Oh my God.
By that, I'm talking
you're talking to someone who grew up in the '80s, like who was a teenager in the
So who do we got?
You know, I was 10 to 20, those like in the '80s. So I mean, you need to define what pop.
And here's the thing, you're because I don't know if there was like New Kids on the Block. They're a little too old for you. You know, you would have been in your 20s, I guess, by the time they came out.
Yeah.
I
wasn't really into the boy band thing, like, because I mean, when I was growing up, the boy band, like, every band was a boy band. Unless you were the Go-Go's or Pat Benatar or Joan Jett, they were all boy bands. Like, everyone was a guy in every band. So I mean, like, you know, like I grew up on like Duran Duran and Depeche Mode and The Cure and the Smiths and, you know, Susie and the Banshees and like what was deemed back then as alternative music. But I mean, like, favorite pop band.
No, you just named a few, man. Depeche Mode, Duran Duran. I know they're not pop. I wouldn't call them alternative music.
It was back then. I mean, the Duran Duran was definitely more pop than, you know, let's say like The Cure. But I mean, their music was so good. Like, their first 3 albums were like just brilliant. And I mean, you know, The Cure had been around for forever. Like, if you ever get a chance to listen to Pornography by The Cure, like, they're still one of my favorite bands. But I don't know, like nowadays, like, I'd say in the 90s, God, were there even boy bands in the 90s?
Yeah, and Backstreet Boys and New Kids and...
Yeah, no, see, if you're talking like Backstreet Boys, I'd definitely be more of an NSYNC guy than a Backstreet Boy, I think.
Okay.
Either way, all their songs sounded exactly the same as Britney Spears, so it didn't really matter, because I think they were all written by the same people. But I would definitely be more an NSYNC person than I would a Backstreet Boy, for sure.
Yeah, I'm with you. I agree between the two of them. I was a New Kids I'm not a lot younger. I'm younger than you are.
Yeah.
And I grew up loving New Kids on the Block. But when the Backstreet Boys came out, I actually saw them in concert at the Warehouse before they were even. You remember they came out with that song?
Oh, nice.
Yeah, man, they were not big at all. But they were a boy band, and I hate to admit it, I liked pop music growing up.
Yeah. Dude, there's nothing wrong with like pop music. Is like, if done right, dude, pop music is awesome.
I saw Britney Spears. I actually went out to Las Vegas last February just to see her, and it was amazing.
Does she have the residency there?
She does. I don't know if she's still doing it, but she did. I went and saw her. It was amazing. I think so. Like one of my colleagues, because I said I loved it. So when they were out in Vegas, they caught her show too, and they came back to like, you like that? I'm like, it was amazing.
Hey man, that's why music is so awesome, because it's totally subjective. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And well, you know what you think is awesome, like someone else might think is complete garbage, and you know what, that's fine too. But you know, as long as you don't let it change how you feel about it, it's all good.
You know what? I think that music is good for that, giving people a sense of individuality. When you can say, it's okay that I don't agree with everyone when it comes to this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's.
And you know what? Some of the best discussions come about people's differing opinions on music. Like, I don't know, you know, how many times, like I worked at Ecstatic, I worked at Eastern Bloc, I worked at Numb. So, I mean, like, working at Eastern Bloc, it was, you know, we were selling records, and I was working in the Jungle Room with Pat and Chris, you know, and so we get, like, you know, people come in, you know, and they're like, oh, I want, and, like, to be honest, like, I was never really into Jump Up too much, like I like the odd, like, True Players or, like, you know, Ganja Records when it came out and stuff. You know, when it came to, like, what's that record label? Ronnie Size's label.
High Rollers?
No, like, from, like, 96, 97. Sub was on it, DJ Die.
I remember.
It had this V recordings. Like when it came to like V, like, you know, people were like, and Ronnie, maybe it's because I'm not a fan of jazz at all, but like Ronnie would, like, you know, his stuff would be a lot more jazzy, but I love DJ Die stuff.
Didn't he use like a Versace symbol or something? Was that him? V recordings? It had like the sun.
It was the sun, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if that was Versace.
I think so.
Yeah, like everyone was like, you know, DJ. You know, Ronnie Size and that, and I just felt like DJ Die, like, was just the shit to me, because it was just these deep rollers, and that's the kind of stuff that like got to me, you know what I mean? But I mean, like, I'd have people, like, I remember this one time, these three kids came in, and, you know, we had all the new releases on the wall and stuff, so like they'd grab stuff and I played for them, and so I'd play the tunes for him, and the one kid would look back at his buddies, and they'd be like, oh yeah, dude, that's a sick tune, and I stopped them. Like, after the third record, I'm like, okay, who's paying for these records? They're like, he is. All right, you two, get the fuck out of the store. If you're buying these records, you need to like them. I don't want you asking anybody else. I want you to feel these records, and if you don't feel them, that's cool. You don't have to buy them, but don't buy shit just because your friends like it, because you know what, after a while, you'll just end up with a bunch of records, and we're all guilty of going through our records and listening to them and going, what the fuck was I smoking when I bought this? Like, they're like, oh, maybe it's the B-side, and you put on the B-side, I'm like, that's even worse than the A-side. I'm like, I don't even know what the hell I was thinking. But, like, you know, if you don't buy it for yourself, then, like, buying a record says, I like this song, I like this sound. Like, when I went record shopping, a lot of it was like 40% I knew what I liked, and 60% was I knew what I hated. And if I like skipping through the records and I heard something that I hated, like it didn't matter what the rest of the tracks I'm like nope, you know. But I mean, those were the best places though for cultivating, like, you know, conversations about, oh, this is the song shit. And then you have somebody like, well, I think it's really awesome. Like, okay, well, why do you, you know, and you'd actually have these, you know, educated, you know, and it didn't really matter because at the end of the day, you weren't going to change each other's mind. But the fact that you were able to have the discussion at all kind of made it awesome. You know what I mean? Because you were able to discuss why you like something. And, you know, and you'd see passion in both people. You know, they wouldn't like argue and be like, oh, you're an idiot or whatever. It'd just be like, dude, but listen to the bass line. And then you like listen to the bass line, like, yeah, you know what, the bass line is pretty dope, you know, but, you know, listen to the aim and it's way too tinny. There's not, you know, there's nothing supporting it, you know, and so you'd come to this like resolution where each person, you know, walked away with their, you know, their pride intact, but, you know, it made them listen to different things. And that's the one thing, like, when people on the outside, whenever you'd explain raves to them, just be like, oh, you just listen to the same repetitive shit over and over again. And it's like, have you ever listened to a track and just like focused on the bass line, or just focused on the aim and break, or the way it cuts up and then just kind of like just stops and then just drops? Like,
you know what?
So many different sounds you can focus on.
I want to say, sorry to cut you off, buddy. I want to say to what you're saying. I think this kind of ties into what we were talking about with sports, where to really appreciate the sport, you have to understand what you're watching. However, hockey, you don't, because it's just hockey. And I think the same could be said for music, in that I don't need to explain country music to you. You put it on, you either like it or you don't.
Right.
With electronic music, especially jungle, and house, techno, Rotterdam, the stuff you do, hardcore, you need explanation. And to be honest, I threw on a Carl Cox Essential mix at work, and somebody in one of the offices yelled out, "Put on something else. I don't stop playing that shit." And I'm like, I get it. I get why he's saying that, because all he hears is do 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 do. Sounds like somebody hit the skip button on the CD and it won't stop. That's all he hears, right? So, but if I was to, like you say, explain it to him, and the metaphor I use, you may have heard me say in one of my previous videos, is if a person doesn't like tomatoes, I don't feed them raw tomatoes. I give them ketchup. And if the guy likes ketchup, I tell him, hey, you know, there's tomato in that. And before you know it, I'll have him, you know, I'll give him some spaghetti sauce, and before you know it, I'll have him eating fucking raw tomatoes. Metaphorically speaking, you have to do the same thing with music.
Right.
You know? And
well, yeah, because I mean, like, you know, to we'll call it the untrained ear. To the untrained ear, it all sounds the same, and I get that, and I totally understand that. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm not used to listening to classical music, you know, and someone's like, dude, listen to the way the oboe just fucking slides in and just like crescendos and gets louder and louder, I'd be like, dude, this all sounds like racket to me. You know what I mean? Not so much with classical music, but I mean, as far as like, you know, electronic music, it's like all it's just all, and it's like, okay, that's fine, but like, listen to the progression. Wait, you know, like, oh, 16 bars, something's gonna happen, and then all of a sudden, like, you know, a ride comes in and just intensifies and grows the sound. It's like, people think that it's all repetitive, but to someone who's been listening to it and is able to appreciate all the fine details of it, it's progressive music. The music is constantly moving. Like, if I close my eyes and I'm listening to a track and it feels like I'm on a train that's moving and it's building and going somewhere, that's a track that is a keeper. If it's just something that, you know, like, I'd have people say, "Oh, I'm like, why do you bring so many records to DJ?" Like, I'd show up to a gig and I'd have like 20 records with me, and they're like, "You only brought 20 records?" I'm like, "I'm only playing for an hour." I'm like, why are you bringing like 80 records? Like, you know, you're playing trance. It's like 6 songs. What are you doing? Like, oh, you know, these are filler tracks. Filler tracks? You're only playing for an hour. You're not playing a 9-hour set. There should be no reason for you to have filler. You know, like, you need to take these people on a journey. They don't want to stop. They don't, you know, they want to progress, and they want you to take them somewhere. So for you to have fillers where nothing happens, it's kind of like being on a bus that's taking you, let's say, from here to North Bay, and then stopping for no reason for like a half hour.
Dominic, that was a horrible metaphor. That is a horrible...
That is not a horrible metaphor.
Why are we driving to North Bay to begin with? What is going...
Listen, either way, you want to get to North Bay, someone's taking you there, you don't want to be stopping for no reason.
No, you don't. Journey. You just want to get to North Bay. That's the truth. And I get what you mean. And I think there's something profound to be spoken about in what you were just discussing about a trance DJ versus a jungle DJ and their crate size. Because, yeah, if a jungle DJ is playing an hour set versus a trance DJ, you'd think the jungle DJ is going to need to have a bigger crate, right?
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, even if the jungle DJ, like, I mean, we did like a radio CHC radio program, and I was like, I'm gonna see how many records I can mix in 15 minutes. We had 15 minute sets. I'm gonna power through and just see how many. So I think I did like 13 tracks, and you know, the place was a complete disaster by the end of it, which is totally normal for me because I'm terrible with taking care of my records. That's for another story altogether. But I mean, even if you're playing an hour set, even if you're doing 3-minute mixes, that's still only 20 records.
It's true.
You know what I mean? Like, I've never planned a set. You know, like, I take my records, like, I don't know what half my records are even called. I just know what they look like, and you know, I'd go through and be like, oh, I'm gonna bring this, and then go to the party, figure out what I'm gonna start with, and then go from there. But like, I'd never play more than 20 records in an hour. So I mean, like, I understand the notion of, well, if you need it, it's there kind of thing. You know, and I'm definitely not one who's evolved digitally, like, where, you know, people have all their stuff on, like, you know, a hard drive or on a thumbstick, and they have, like, you know, 3,000 songs at their disposal. That's just too much for me. I think my simplicity does not allow me to carry more than what I need. Because it's like, you know, when you're making a track and you have this like library of samples, and you're just kind of like going through, and you're like, oh, that sounds good, and you have too much selection. Sometimes is a bad thing. Like, that's why I'd rather remix, because you already have the sounds. Like, okay, well, how can I make these sounds mine? You know what I mean? And then just adding a couple of tweaks here and there. You know, I'd rather someone say, okay, I picked out your records. This is what you're playing. Go. I'm like,
yeah.
Awesome.
I feel that way whenever I'm watching something on Netflix. It's like an analysis paralysis. It's like, no, I have too much to. Somebody just pick something for me, please.
Yeah, exactly. And you just you spend like a half hour just adding shit to your list that you never end up watching because it's just overwhelming.
It is. It really. And you know what? That never used to happen at the video store. I never walked into the video store and went, oh my God, there's too many movies. But for some reason, when it's on my digital screen, I'm swiping for like 2 hours going, what the fuck am I doing? Okay, here, let's move through. Honestly, buddy, we've already gone 55 minutes, and I think we have hours and hours of talk. So before I even get into these, would you be willing to do this again in the next couple of weeks? We'll continue from where we are.
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool. Because yeah, I've got like a list of questions. I think we've answered two because we are just no, and I'm loving it, man. I'm loving hearing you. Okay, so I'm gonna skip over this one and this one. Okay, so let me ask you this. This is from the day that you started. You were talking to early '90s to today. What would you say was the pinnacle of our rave culture?
See, now I watched the video, the podcast where you asked Brad this, and I thought he answered it amazingly. I don't see. The thing is, for me, I'd say the whole thing was a pinnacle. Like, when you look back at everything that we accomplished as a community, like self-sustained, own security, own sound system, the only thing that we needed help with, or, we needed to outsource were the venues. But I mean, once we got those venues, we kept those venues. With the clothing lines, we were so self-sustained. We didn't need anybody's outside help. We had, we got our own investors for throwing parties. All the money that was spent within the community. To pick like one era is so difficult because so many things happen at different times. Like, it's like saying where was the pinnacle of drum and bass? Was it, because when it was breakbeat, it was huge. When it was ragged jungle, it was massive. When it was hip hop jungle, when they moved into like, the halftime, like, Andy C and what's his name? Hype. Like, and they went, and, Darren J, when they went from like the ragga stuff into the hip hop stuff, it was just this constant evolution. And, and then you got like, like Ed Rush and Optical and the whole like dark sound of, the late 90s and early 2000s, which was fucking incredible too. And, it's hard to pick a specific time frame as to where you were just like, yeah, this is it. Like, we're where we want to be. Because I think in and of itself, the rave scene is never content in being stagnant. It was never content with, it was never content with the sound. They always wanted, that bass line's sick. But look what I did in the studio. I came up with this. I'm just like, dude, Alien Girl? Are you kidding me? Dude, the bass line in that fucking song, like, and I remember, 1993 being at Magic Mondays and Neil, Dr. No, dropping Valley of the Shadows for the first time. And I was just like, oh my God, what is this? And that was like, the first introduction to like, jungle, like, because up until then it was just all breakbeat, or hardcore. And dude, when that song, like, everyone remembers where they were the first time they heard that song. Where were you the first time you heard that song?
Alien Girl?
No. Valley of the Shadows by Andy C.
To be honest, I can't identify it by name. I'd have to hear it. I don't know Valley of the Shadows.
It's 31 Seconds.
Oh, okay. Yes, okay. 31 Seconds. Helter Skelter tape, it has to be. Where I didn't hear it live in a venue first, but I know that one goes up there with like T- or Slip and Slides. What is it? Men of Steel. Like, for songs that I just like, they're in my head, but I don't hear them anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would think that the T-31, I would have thought I heard that on a Helter Skelter or One Nation tape.
but yeah, so I can't really like I agree with Brad, like as far as like population wise in the scene. Definitely we hit the pinnacle like late 90s, early 2000s. But I mean, the scene was just always like just so constantly evolving, and it's what, you know, made the scene amazing. But I mean, it was its greatest strength and its greatest weakness at the same time.
What do you mean?
Because, well, because the scene was constantly evolving, constantly moving, constantly reinventing itself. To put it in like a work term, the turnover with people who went to parties became quicker, if that makes any sense. Like, people who I met raving in 1993 were not raving in 1996, a lot of them.
Because why? Because they had moved on in life?
For whatever reason, you know, whether it was they just didn't like, you know, the way the music was going, or for personal reasons. But for whatever reason, you know, you'd have like this turnover rate.
And is what you're saying that turnover rate became more, you know, closer together, where it used to take 3 years, now it was happening within 6 months?
Yeah, but the one thing that was its savior is the rate at which people were entering the scene was almost double that. So people who became disenfranchised with the scene and just, it wasn't for them anymore. So if like out of 100 people, 50 were leaving, well, another 75 were coming in. So while there was an influx in turnover, it was barely noticeable because the amount of people coming in was greater. So for every 50 people you were losing in the scene, you were gaining another 75 to 100. So it added to the growth, but it didn't necessarily add to the quality of the scene.
I get what you mean, man. That makes a lot of sense. Because it makes a lot of sense, Dominic. And to me, that might be one of the issues we're having today, is now we're losing the people, we're not gaining the new ones.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And you know, it's like I don't really go out to parties that much. One, I'm like social media inept, if you want to call it that. Like, I don't, you know, it was great back in the day. You know, like, you'd walk out of a party, and I swear to God, it was like walking, you know, everyone who walked out of a party between the years of 1993 to like 2003 must have felt like a fucking movie star, because when you walked out, there was a line of fucking people waiting to give you shit.
Yeah, man. And flyers, here you go.
You know what I mean? Because like I you know, I watched one of your podcasts where you say, you know, you stood out there, you know, handing out flyers and stuff, you know, and you'd walk out and there'd just be, you know, this people just giving you stuff, just promoting stuff that was coming up, and there was so much stuff happening.
I would put on a spectacle, to be honest. Like, I wasn't just handing you a flyer. I would be kicking you some right, you know what I mean? Yeah. I was very lively and animated. When you came out of that party, you remembered the flyer I gave you, just because I was right. But sorry, go on.
But I mean, like, where, you know, because Brad mentioned, you know, as one of the biggest changes, or one of the big contributors to the scene, or to you know, the local artists getting recognized and stuff, is, you know, the internet. And you know, he mentioned, you know, you don't even need to leave your house, you know, to experience it, kind of thing. And it kind of made me think of what the rave scene would have been like in 1993 if we had all the social media and technology that we have now.
Yeah. Like, do you think it would have been better?
Well, it's hard to say, because I mean, there'd be definitely more live sets on video that weren't shit-ass quality, which is one. I mean, I think that it happened at the perfect time, and it grew exponentially. It didn't grow too quickly. It kind of grew with the maturity and expectations of the people that were going to the parties. It seemed to have a natural growth or upbringing, if you will, if you want to, compare it to a child. There was no pressure. I mean, there was always, if you were throwing a party, I threw parties with Doze. That shit was like stressful. Like throwing a party and needing to pay someone back for expenses, or needing to, have money for flights and get visas for DJs and stuff. It's very stressful. But I think that the scene grew at its own pace. It was very word of mouth. There was only a couple places where you could buy tickets, and they were, you couldn't buy them through Ticketmaster in the 90s. You either bother at like Ecstatic or like one of the record shops. Played a record, for example, like you wanted new tickets, you wanted tickets for parties, you wanted new music, played a record Thursday afternoon. And, it would be rammed in there, and it was awesome because you could go through records with your friends, and you're like, dude, look what I found, and they give you the cut eye because they had just been in that pile and they completely missed it. But I think had the internet been around and we had the technology and the social media and social networking that we have now, I think the scene would have burnt out long before it did.
I agree with you on that last part. I don't think it would have been necessarily great. You do mention... No, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, if you're talking about this, that you'd have better recordings, not necessarily. You just have more of them. Just because we'd have the internet doesn't mean we would have had better recordings. You know what I mean? You just have an abundancy of shitty sets available. In all honesty,
at your fingertips, though.
Right, at your fingertips, exactly. When I went to, because honestly, I grew up listening to you, but I don't know you on a personal level. And obviously, before we spoke, I wanted to research you and try and get some personal questions. But there was nothing. I couldn't find anything about you. And even looking up your sets, I could find a lot of people asking about you. Some people making references to what they thought, or, people asking questions, was this and that. But nothing was definite, like a biography of DJ Dominik with a list set, where it's like, here's, because honestly, my favorite set I've told you was THR Army of Hardcore, you versus Dominik and Spock together. I can't find it anywhere. And prowling the internet, though, I did find, like I sent you one of them from '95, which is a great set, but I found some sets. There's a Liquid Adrenaline set of you from 1999, and it's a great set, but the recording's horrible. So it's actually counterproductive.
It's like tape of a tape, and like whoever uploaded the tape had already played the shit out of the tape. It's like going back and finding like your Darren J live at AWOL. When with MCGQ from '96, and putting that in the tape player, and you've already played the shit out of it like 200 times at least, and then making a recording of it. It's kind of like taking a VHS tape and putting it onto a digital format. It's still an analog recording, no matter how much you try to like buff anything. Like, I'm definitely not technically savvy. So
hold on. You know what it's really like? It's like driving to North Bay.
You know what? And stopping every 20 minutes for no fucking reason. It's true. That's what it's like. And,
okay, hold on. With that, I'm gonna drive. We got two last questions. You kind of touched in on this, so I'm gonna what is the biggest change you've noticed? You kind of touched in on the internet. You were sharing in Brad's answer, but do you want to elaborate a little bit on that? The biggest changes you've noticed in the scene from day one to today?
Well, the one thing that I mean, apart from the fact that parties have, like, I don't really go out that much anymore, so I can't really attest to it. But I find that, you know, when I have gone out, like, you know, the people that are there seem to be there for, you know, the right reasons, or like for the music, or and it's the one thing that I've always appreciated and adored about Jungle fans. D&B heads are knowledgeable. They're like, they know their shit, and they've evolved to a point where, you know, they know, like, you could bring someone that's obscure and there'll be at least 40 or 50 heads out there that know everything about this guy. You know, they know like what labels he's been released on. We used to educate ourselves on, you know, the music, and like, especially like just tunes, like, you know, when you're playing, or you're in a record shop and a tune drops, and you close your eyes and you can just picture what it sounds like on a huge system. Like, if it sounds awesome on these like little shitty monitors in the record store, you can just imagine what it's going to sound like on a big system. And there's, I don't know, I find with the internet, it kind of brings us closer together, but at the same time it takes away the social aspect of what the scene was built on. You know, it was, you know, the scene was about getting together with friends and going to a party and coming up with elaborate stories to tell each other's parents, so that, you know, you both got your asses covered, so you can go out for the whole night and make it home without getting in shit, kind of thing. And it used to be a place where you'd go to meet people and to celebrate music with people, and to hang out and catch up on what happened during the week, or to, you know, continue partying from, you know, going to the basement the night before and you're like still rocking out and it's Thursday, but whatever. There was just the sense of community seems to have kind of dissipated, and people's wanting, I always say that the best way to see how far into the future you are going to go is to know how far back you're willing to go. And you know, back in the 90s, we, you know, everyone knew the history of where it came from. And so in getting a history of where it came from, you can kind of project and see down the road of where you want it to go. And it's not necessarily like the entire scene, but your own personal kind of growth. You know, you go back and just be like, holy shit, you know, in 1991, I was listening to Acid House, and now I'm listening to like fucking Ed Rush and Optical, you know, on No U-Turn Records, and like it's the darkest, most evil shit. How the fuck did I get here? You know what I mean? And you don't even notice the progression that you're going through until, you know, at one point you're just like, either get a flash from the past where you're like, oh dude, Trip to the Moon Part 2, like, you know, and then you kind of like just retrace your own personal history in the scene, and, you know, what things have happened to you to, you know, either change the way you look at music, the type of music you listen to. You know, like there's a ton of people I'm sure that used to listen to me and, you know, dance their asses off for like an hour and a half, who now listen to house. You know, and it's just like these everyone had their own little personal journey. Some people decided, after 3 years or 4 years or 3 months that, I've done everything that I want to do in the scene. I'm out, kind of thing. I've grown, and I don't see myself growing any further by continuing to go to these parties for whatever reason, music, lifestyle choice, whatever. So it's, I don't know. I just think that the scene, the way that it grew was a very natural growing pains. It did have some growth spurts, which kind of put, a little bit of tension, because sometimes you get too big too fast. That's just as overwhelming as not doing anything. I find that had the internet been around back then, I think it would have either one, like, blown up and got way too big way too quickly. And it's not just Toronto, it's like all over the world. Like, I played in LA in the hardcore scene. Like, I played at like 190 beats per minute. I was the slowest DJ in the room. Everyone else was playing like 320, 340. So, like, I mean, every place, and all the little places and all the little different scenes in between, like Peterborough and, London and Ottawa and, and like Chatham and Windsor and like just all these little tiny places that, they would come to the city and then they would take it back to their communities and then they would grow. So but it seemed like a more natural growth than, I think the internet would just have been, a shot of adrenaline to the heart over and over and over again until either it exploded or imploded on itself.
Yeah, and I can appreciate what you're saying. I think summing up what you just said in a simple sentence, it would be we need more camaraderie amongst our junglists or our ravers altogether.
Yeah, and I think, like, history. We live in an age right now, and I really don't want to sound like that fucking old guy, but we live in an age where everything is just so disposable, where people live in the right now. It's not even like living in the now, it's like living in the right now. And when you're living in the right now, how you got there doesn't matter. Where you're going doesn't matter, because you're just living in the right now. And there's no time to reflect and there's no time to project when all you're doing is just living in the right now kind of thing. And, I love my records. I've sold a bunch of records, like a lot of the ones that I was like back when we were talking where I was like, what the fuck was I smoking when I bought this? Sold a bunch of those. But I mean, I still have like, 1,600 records. And I can't imagine like anything happening to them. But I mean, nowadays when everything's just so disposable, it's like I have my, as easy as it is to walk around with your entire record collection on a USB stick, knowing that if anything happens to it, like you leave it on the bus or whatever, you have every single thing on there on a hard drive saved somewhere else where you can easily access it. Like, but then if you don't like it, you can just delete it. And I think we just live in an age where it's very easy to delete, and very difficult to reflect.
And that's why we have herpes. To remind us that you cannot just hit delete and you will always remember.
Exactly.
But hey, with that, I'm going to ask you my final question for this evening. And like I say, I want to chat again soon. So this will be my infamous vault question, which I'm sure you know.
Vault question. I've seen these.
Yeah, I've seen these. Okay, so if you could put 5 items into a vault that would encapsulate our rave culture, what would those 5 items be?
See, I've watched like 4 or 5 of your interviews, so like I've kind of cheated and kind of been like looking over at my friends' papers to see what their answers are. So definitely would be the Flyers.
Yeah.
Thanks to Rob, he did say cassette player, which would go with the cassettes. I would say if there were 5 things, I would put the biggest wall of speakers, enough to rattle the walls at Cinespace into that vault, and that would include turntables and a mixer, and for you, I guess, a microphone.
Thank you.
So definitely the Flyers, sound system, the clothing, UFO, Snug. See, what else would I put? If I had to put one record, see what you're doing? You're making me you're making me put pressure on myself now by just coming up with suggestions and then having to answer them. I would say Trip to the Moon Part 2 by Asen.
Okay.
Would be in there. And you know what? Why not? All my friends. Everybody gets in, and
you're all wearing fun fur. I picture.
What?
I said you're all wearing fun fur.
At first, like honestly, fun fur is awesome. It's putting on a fun fur outfit is like putting on a mascot outfit. You just the inhibition just goes right out the window, and you're like, pom-pomming it up and stuff. But as a practical outfit, it doesn't breathe well.
No.
It can get itchy.
To be honest, I remember you and Fuzzboy, I believe, wearing cow fun fur thing.
Print.
He had the cow. What did you have? I just remember the two of you were wearing them. You had a tiger or something. Was it a tiger?
Yeah, mine were probably baby blue fun fur overalls.
Is that what you wore?
Probably.
I do remember.
It would definitely be baby blue, and it would probably be the overalls.
Yeah. I saw actually in your photos, you had one of those, the overalls with the seatbelt buckle. Yes, that was. I had one of those belts actually, like for around the waist.
I actually still do have one of those belts. I got an Attack on Titan
nice
chibi one, and I got a Death Note. I have a Death Note one as well. Yeah. Those overalls were awesome. Apart from the fact that those seatbelt buckles were heavy as fuck, so like if you're DJing and like moving around, it'd be like having like these like really saggy metal tits that like would knock shit.
Did it hurt at all? Like, would it hit up against your collarbone or anything? Like,
oh no, I wasn't that crazy, but I mean, if like I do a lot of bouncing around and stuff, so they just like kind of like sway to and fro kind of thing.
Totally. But okay, hold on. Let's see. So we got Flyers. We've got a cassette player. We've got with a microphone. We've got
it's a sound system.
The sound system with the mic.
The whole sound system.
Okay. And then we've got the last thing there.
We got everybody.
All your friends.
You guys are coming there with. There's no point in having a sound system if you're the only one that can enjoy it.
That's the truth. And then hold on, you also had you threw in 6 because you threw in your favorite record and all the clothing lines too.
Yes, I did. I cheated. I just you weren't looking, and I stuffed the bag with some more shit.
You know what happens now? Now the next person can only put in 4 items. Way to go, Dominik.
Well,
Way to go.
Considering the next person might be me for the second part of this interview, where we can actually talk about
We'll get more into the industry itself, and to be honest, I want to talk more about your history. What I'd like. Well, I'll say goodnight to you now, but if you can, let's think about what we talked about today, and if there's anything that you'd like me to focus in on, let me know, and I'll pose the question, and I'll say the same thing. Well, to be honest, my listeners probably aren't going to hear this until we've spoken the second time already, but if anybody has any idea, any questions that you'd like me to ask Dominik, please, by all means. Dom, stay on the phone with me, okay? I'm going to say farewell to this. Just stay here. All right, guys, so that was me. That was part 1 of me and DJ Dominik. We said we would do 20. We've done almost an hour and a half. So that's great. Thank you, Dominik. Until next time, guys, thanks for tuning in. Dominik, say peace out to the fans.
Peace out, fans.
Peace out, guys.
We'll talk to you soon.